two parts I'm going to talk about in introducing. First, I want to introduce the organization and why it is, what its story is, and then to talk about our upcoming fundraisers that are being scheduled now in March and April. And we're going to be showing you some video presentation on a promo from the telling that was our first telling last April 13th that we put together in 3 months like total maniacs and had no idea how it was going to happen. We're talking about divine intervention. It definitely was divine intervention. People just came forward from out of the woodwork to help us get this organization off the ground and to have our performance happen. And as a matter of fact, Anne was one of them that came forth. She was our stage manager. She came out of the woodwork. I'm going to be your stage manager. And I went, all right, we need to. So she's been wonderful and a great support for, the organization. And this organization, sometimes I don't know where to begin with it because it comes from years of professional work, working 30 more years with women and families who have suffered trauma, abuse, addiction. And it comes out of my own personal story, my own personal life story. And give her a voice, and what you can see in the promo is really a piece of the story. It's a piece of every woman's story. And when I say a piece, is because every woman's story comes from a generation, generations and generations of stories. We have all we're all born with a core brilliance, and we're born with a core trauma. And we come to this earth with that, our conflict. That's our journey, it's our spiritual journey. And at a very, very young age, I was inclined towards the arts. I was very artistic, drawing, writing. And that really was my saving grace. Growing up in my home, my story started with my grandmother, who came from Poland, Russia, Poland, escaped the pogroms. Her 13 brothers and sisters were killed in the Holocaust. She came here alone, 16 years old. Got married. Husband died at 30. She was left with 3 children at a very young age, and she became a seamstress. And from being a seamstress, she helped my father open a business and her son open a business. And she was this little 4-foot woman who walked around with a cigarette hanging out of her mouth and a bottle of schnapps, which is.
I like her already.
That's only one part of her. She was, and it was so funny because she'd always have this white little bag that she'd walk around and go to the bathroom with, and I'd say, Grandma, why are you going to the bathroom with this pocketbook? And I didn't realize she had a schnapps in there, and she was like, it took me until I got older to realize what she was doing. I mean, I was young, I didn't know what she was doing. And she was tough, and she was hard, and she was a survivor. Unfortunately, my grandmother, and plus she had a boyfriend for many years.
Oh.
She would never marry.
Oh, okay.
Good thought.
She would never marry her. She was a very independent woman, but unfortunately, she was an abuser. And coming from her generation, her story, which I'm still trying to find that story because she came to America with not one picture, not one anything from the family she came from. So I never knew what village she came from. So the pictures of my ancestors, and I always wondered, where did I come from? Like, what was the story? And one day I sat with my grandma. We were sitting in the condo in Miami, and I said to her, Grandma, how did you come here? What's your story? And she went, her Yiddish, and she said, I was smuggled in a pickle barrel. And I went, what? And she said, I was smuggled in a pickle barrel. And that I don't want to talk about anymore. And that was all I knew. And from that began my journey, my story, into understanding my grandmother and what she came from and the trauma she brought, her generational trauma, because she lost a family that she never grieved, she never felt, she never talked about. And unfortunately, all of that internalized rage, all that internalized grief leaked onto my mother. And she abused my mother. And from that, my mother abused me and abused my sister. Very severe abuse. And growing up as a child, not understanding for these children, I and being gifted with art, that was my escape. But art was a very interesting experience for me because it became a spiritual journey, a spiritual path for me. And I began to channel things, and I began to hear things and see altered states of realities, and I began to realize that at a very young age that I was here for a purpose, that I was here to help others understand. And I knew this at a very young age, but I had no words for it. And I thought everybody knew this, but they didn't. And in schools, in the years that I went to school, nobody asked, what's wrong with you, kid? You're acting kind of weird. They didn't talk about abuse. They didn't suspect the families. My family looked beautiful, wonderful. They were upper middle class Jewish family. Nobody suspected it. So it was hidden. It was all hidden. And this hiding caused me through the years, at a very young age of 10 years old, to develop a spastic colon. They took me to a doctor. At 10 years old, they put me on Darvon. Which is a very heavy medication.
I was on Darvon.
And I was zonked out. I was zonked out at 10 years old. Nobody even questioned it. And, well, of course, but from that I was having more out-of-body experiences, so it was like, oh. So it was like, okay, I'll just go to my easel and paint some of this stuff. So this is what was happening to me, and I had no idea what was happening. And then finally, when I turned 16, and I always give credit to Natalie Wood, and I will tell you why, is because I was watching Splendor in the Grass, one of my favorite movies. In love with Natalie Wood and Maura Beatty, and she had a nervous breakdown from her mother, and I was going, ooh, I identify with this girl. And she went off to an institution and did art and was wearing this gorgeous white hat and married a doctor, and I said, I want to go to one of those places. Where are they? I want to wear a white hat, and I want to look beautiful, and I want to paint, and so I owe it to Natalie Wood, and on that, at 16 years old, I went on my quest to find a therapist. And in those years, they only had psychiatrists. They did not have all the alternatives that they have today. And I found a Jungian therapist, luckily for me, because he was very much into the unconscious, into art, into using writing, into using all my art to go into my subconscious, and I began my journey. My spiritual journey began, and it's never stopped. And from that, I just was led. I was just led into, I first worked with children, and I began to recognize I had this incredible intuition, this credible kind of psychic knowing. When I would look at children, I would see that, where they were wounded, I would see where they were brilliant. I would see both. And I would go into the schools, and I would work with them, and I was always given, like, these really difficult children to work with, and I would have them achieve, and they would ask me what I was doing, and I was using art and creativity and meditation back in the early 70s to help them love themselves. And I would say, I'm teaching them to love themselves. So I left the school system, and I just began doing classes on meditation and art and creativity, and people in my classes started to have these incredible epiphanies and changes, and it was revealing itself to me that I had this gift. I did not know what it was, and I just kept following it and following it and following it. And in that process, I was still healing myself. I was always healing myself, and as I was doing that, because healing is a spiritual path, it's a path of consciousness, it's continuous, it's never ending, and we're always integrating all the different parts of ourselves. And like I said, we bring into this life, culturally, generationally, socially, all of who we are. And when all those pieces integrate, we become wholer and more authentic and actualized. And it doesn't end. Like people say, well, when's this going to be over? I don't know. When is life? Who knows? I mean, I can't give that blueprint. It's all I can do is help people. So as I began to grow this practice that just kind of evolved itself, and people were coming to me from all over, different states, and I was learning more and more and being trained more and more and apprenticed more and more to develop these gifts that I had to help heal other people. And my art was growing and my creativity was growing, and I always found that art and creativity told the story. That it didn't analyze it, break it down, try to fix it. It gave the space, that really sacred space, to be able to really come in and say, hey, this is who I am, hear me. And it's what creates the empathy and compassion. I mean, that's why we love to go to movies and read books and, we were in awe of the biblical stories. Why? Because they're telling us something about ourselves, or Shakespeare and the great Greek tragedies. I mean, this is ancient, and this ancient ritual is feminine. It's feminine. For 5,000 years, a matriarchal existence was on this planet from all the cultures around the world. And there was rituals of when women came together and told stories. And they held these women, and they held them in their brilliance, and they held them in their trauma. And they helped them to heal and become whole. And there's a whole history of this that's not been told. So Give Her a Voice has her story beyond each one of us. It's a bigger story. It's a bigger picture. It's all of us. And to me, now in this present time, the feminine women are here to really heal this planet. And we all need to come forward to bond and make community, and to come out from behind our fear and our shame, and to be able to really connect and feel each other and hear each other and become one, and to change around the culture. And you look at the culture, and the fundraiser that we're going to be doing is this film called Misrepresentation, of how women are disparaged in our culture and in our media. And it's still going on. I mean, we had Women's Lib, which was great, but it equalized us, politically, and it equalized us financially, but not emotionally and spiritually. And we're first actualizing that in our culture. Women today come to me and they say, oh, if I feel this, I'm weak. Whereas to understand that a feeling is a strength. It's a teacher. It teaches us who we are. It's a piece of ourselves that needs to be really seen and heard and received. So, that Give Her a Voice came out of 7 years, 30 years, no, my whole life, but actually it was birthed in an unfortunate trauma of my own that was on top of the trauma that I had believed I had recovered from, of my childhood. My mother, at the end of her life, which was 7 years ago, was in a psychiatric ward, and she died. She stopped eating, and she just died. 4 months later, my sister committed suicide. The day that my sister was buried, I got severely ill, and I was in and out of hospitals. They couldn't diagnose me, and then finally they did diagnose me, and it was called gastroparesis. And it's a very undiagnosed, misunderstood condition because people think it's digestion. It is not digestion. It's motility. And it is idiopathic gastroparesis, which means, I don't know what it is. So none of the doctors knew, and they totally, I had a death sentence on me. And I was very near death, actually, when I finally said, this is not going to bring me down. I'm going to find the answer to this. And that's when I began to really study trauma and complex trauma. And I began to understand the mind-body connection between complex trauma and how so many symptoms come out of complex trauma, which is depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, eating disorders, all of these things that would be medicated for and being cognitive behavioral therapy is not working. And the research is showing that this type of therapy does not work, especially all the prescription drugs that are being given. I mean, it's just killing our society. It's killing our minds. It's killing our bodies. It's killing our culture. And the doctors and the pharmaceuticals are making tons of money. And even the medical schools are being bribed by the pharmaceuticals and buying medical books for them. It's a massive conspiracy, believe me. And it's because the feminine is the one that has most of these symptoms. 1 out of 10 women have depression. And what does the doctor do? Here, take Prozac. Here, take Wellbutrin. And then one medication on top of the other. So for me, my mother was diagnosed as a borderline personality, which they said was no help for, which is not true today. My sister was also borderline. And, they're given a slew of drugs which actually make them more psychotic and more hallucinatory. So I began to say, this is my heritage. This is in my DNA. This is my story. And from the ashes of myself, which was literally ashes, rose this incredible vision of Give Her a Voice. And the women that I was working with at the time, I said, how would you like if I taped you and just tell your stories? And I was bringing them through these very deep processes, and There was lots of change, evolution, transformation going on, and community happening between us. And they said, sure, why not, you know? So I put the camera on. I said, okay, let's roll them. And then we tried to actually enter that into Oprah's own network. We tried to get that on as a show. Didn't happen, of course. I said, well, I'm not giving up on this because I really believe this. So the next thing, my daughter is a choreographer, and she's a dancer, and she's extremely creative, and we always go doing creative projects. And we said, why don't we put this together as a show? And she knew singers, and she knew, and I was working with some of her dancers in New York, and we just put together this group of amazing, talented women, and we said, let's do this. And in 3 months, we went through this intensive process of healing, transformation, directing, coaching, scripting, theatrical, dramatics. I mean, it was just movement. It was just this entire program, very intense for 3 months. And we put together this show. We were putting hands in people's pockets. Give me your money. I'll take a penny. Give me 2 pennies. 3 pennies to give them.
$9.
We had no pride whatsoever. We just said, look, we want to do this, please, please, please. And at the end, we decided to give the 50% of the ticket proceeds to Brooklyn School for Girls, a home for girls, which is a home where these girls from 12 to 18 have been severely raped, incested. I mean, really horror stories. Stacy, just wonderful, the one who was the clinical therapist there, was just totally, support for us. And we, at the end, with it all, amazingly enough, we had cameras donated. We had, everything was donated. It was like unbelievable. We knew it was meant to be, because things were just being donated all over the place. And at the end, we were able to raise like $16,000, and we gave $3,900 to Brooklyn. And we said, after it happened, we all fell on the floor. Okay, I'm dead. And then we went, now what? And here is the now what. We're here in the now what. What's next? And what's next is, this is our year of awareness and fundraising. We want to create programs for the telling, continue yearly programs to create a space for people to go through the process, to be in the telling or not, but to benefit, and to allow people to begin to come forth and create a community, and to also bring in the creative processes, the creative, expression, and also introducing to the community the alternative processes and spiritual processes that help heal. Because, the community at large, unfortunately, our system does not cover it. If you want to go to an acupuncturist, if you want to go to a hypnotherapist, they don't cover these alternatives, So, if you don't have insurance, and even today most people don't have insurance. So we want to be able to offer this, give scholarship people, give programs, so it's affordable. It's affordable. I mean, people don't have access or even knowledge that these things exist. And I'm not going to speak for Rita, because Rita has her own story of herself, but of her son. And I won't speak for her. But what she's going through with her son in the system is just outrageous. And it shows that the system is only for the wealthy. So we want to create something where everyone can really come. So, to be able to get people, of course, that trauma, complex trauma, to me is the core root of what we need to keep going and healing and understanding in our mind, body, spirit. And then our core brilliance can emerge from that. That's basically my story to a bit. And right now I'm also in the process, I wrote a trilogy, a novel of trilogies that unleash a deeper part of my story that's fictionalized, because there's many things that through the years I've channeled through this process. Many of the women that I've worked with have made transitions into careers, or gone into new healing professions, or walked out of the corporate world and started to pursue other avenues of their life that they thought they'd never pursued before. I've worked with women that have come into me suicidal and just lost and have come out, emerged into a self that they never knew existed. So I felt that if this was my time of my life, where I needed to give, just give, and not think about, I got to build my practice. I didn't want to think about that anymore. I wanted to give because I want to give. And to really help women. And in helping women, you help children and you help their families. Because it's the women that carry it. It's really the women that carry it. They're the ones, we are the ones that birth it all. We are. So we need to take back that power and say, hey, I'm here.
Right.
And I feel.
I'm with you.
And I think. And I'm going to scream and yell and curse if I want. So, and that's spiritual too. You don't have to be so nice. And I curse a lot. I'm from New York and Brooklyn, so I curse.
Whereabouts in Brooklyn? Whereabouts in Brooklyn? Whereabouts in Brooklyn?
Flatbush.
Okay, Park Slope.
Oh, whoa.
No, I wasn't. When I was growing up, it wasn't so fancy.
Anyway, so what we're going to do is we're going to show you 8 minutes of the telling, and it really is just a piece, it's just a snapshot.
Is it 8 minutes?
It's an 8 minutes.
She said I'm in the airport, but she wants to see it.
Okay, we're going to start right now.
Go now.
And then, don't forget, if you're going to leave, you'll listen to this representation film. Yeah, because I'd love for you to come to that.
I just need to say something to you. I am in the healthcare for the SSRIs that she was talking about, but even the hospitals recognize today the importance of knowing trauma. Hospitals are getting educated and being trauma informed. DCF initiative is trauma. So, you know, 51% of people that are diagnosed with schizophrenia are trauma. Not schizophrenia.
That's a fun story.
Okay? It's trauma.
It's all trauma.
Yeah.
Well, my grandmother, borderline trauma. My mother, trauma. I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder.
Right.
And they are now finding that men who come home from war have gastroparesis.
Gastroparesis, absolutely right.
So I started, my research. I'm building research now.
Well,
to really,
DCF will listen to you because I think
it's all trauma.
It's all trauma, and they recognize,
and
everybody.
It's not recognized as the core symptom, the core of all the symptoms.
Right.
So we're going to show this.
Okay.
Well, she wants to
We have raffle prizes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Am I in the way?
No, not at all.
Raffle, 3 beautiful gifts, and